Canadian and PEI farmers could be shipping potatoes to Mexico as soon as this fall. The Canadian Food and Inspection Agency reached a deal to export them for eating and processing.
Every country right now, we've been working extremely hard to diversify our markets. I think it's extremely important. And this is really going to benefit Canadian producers.
As Nicole Weisberg reports, Alberta is the top potato producer in Canada, so our farmers could benefit.
Something unusual just happened in Canada's farming fields, and most people completely missed it. On the surface, it looks like a simple agricultural deal, a routine shipment, just potatoes moving from one country to another. But if you look closer, really closer, you will realize this is not about potatoes at all. This is about frustration. This is about independence. And this is about a nation quietly making a decision that could reshape trade relationships across an entire continent. Because when a country starts moving its exports away from its most powerful neighbor, that is not a business decision, that is a signal. And today, we are going to decode exactly what that signal means. To understand why this moment matters, you have to go back a few decades. For a very long time, Canada and the United States shared one of the most stable economic partnerships in the world. Every single day, thousands of trucks crossed the border carrying food, energy, raw materials, and manufactured goods. Entire industries were built on one simple assumption that this relationship would always remain predictable, always remain safe. For Canadian farmers especially, the American market was not just important, it was everything. It was the foundation on which they planned their seasons, made their investments, and built their futures. But slowly, that confidence began to crack. Disputes started appearing in places where cooperation once seemed guaranteed, arguments over dairy quotas. Tariffs suddenly placed on Canadian steel and aluminum. Long and painful fights over lumber exports. Each disagreement sent the same quiet message to Canadian industries. This partnership is not as secure as you think. And with every dispute, more and more Canadian businesses started asking a question they never had to ask before. What happens if we cannot rely on America anymore? That question became impossible to ignore during the presidency of Donald Trump. His administration's America First strategy was direct and unapologetic. American industries would come first. American workers would come first. And if that meant putting pressure on longtime partners, so be it. For Canada, this was a dramatic shift. Almost overnight, the tone of the relationship changed. Tariffs appeared suddenly and without warning. Trade negotiations became aggressive and uncomfortable. Political rhetoric between leaders turned sharp and cold. The message that Canadian exporters received was simple, but deeply unsettling. Your access to our market is no longer guaranteed. Industries that had spent decades building supply chains, relationships, and entire business models around American buyers suddenly found themselves standing on uncertain ground. And that uncertainty forced a very important realization across Canada. Depending entirely on one market, no matter how large or powerful, is a dangerous strategy. This is where the potato story becomes important. Farmers in Prince Edward Island produce some of the finest russet potatoes in all of North America. These are the potatoes used in restaurants, food processing plants, and kitchens across the continent. For years, the majority of their exports traveled south, straight into the American market. But when that market began feeling uncertain, these farmers started thinking differently. Instead of asking how much they could sell to one country, they began asking how many countries they could reach. And when they looked south, not toward the United States, but further south toward Mexico, they found something remarkable. Mexico, a country with over 120 million consumers, imports massive quantities of food every single year. And russet potatoes? Mexican farmers do not produce them in significant quantities. It was an opportunity hiding in plain sight. With the support of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, which oversees agricultural trade standards, shipments of Canadian russet potatoes began moving toward Mexican buyers. On paper, it looked like a routine regulatory approval. But economically, it represented something much larger. It was the beginning of a deliberate strategy to reduce dependence on a single market. Now here is where this story becomes truly fascinating. This potato deal does not exist in isolation. It exists within the framework of the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, the trade deal that governs economic relationships across North America. That agreement was designed to promote cooperation. But its difficult renegotiation also reminded Canadian industries of one uncomfortable truth. Trade rules can change whenever political priorities change. And so Canadian farmers, manufacturers, and exporters are now doing something that would have seemed unnecessary just 10 or 15 years ago. They are actively building relationships with alternative markets. They are spreading their economic ties across multiple directions. They are making sure that if one door closes, another door is already open. This is not hostility toward America. Let that be very clear. This is not about politics or revenge or punishment. This is about resilience. Smart businesses and smart nations do not put everything into one basket. They diversify. They prepare. They make decisions today that protect them from uncertainty tomorrow. And what makes this moment so powerful is how quietly it is happening. There are no dramatic speeches, no angry press conferences, no public declarations of independence, just farmers, shipping companies, and trade agencies making practical decisions that will slowly but permanently reshape the economic map of North America. So what does a potato shipment from Prince Edward Island to Mexico actually tell us? It tells us that economic relationships are never permanent. They shift. They respond to political pressure. They evolve based on trust. And what happens when that trust begins to fade? It tells us that when a powerful partner starts treating you more like a competitor than an ally, smart nations do not wait for things to get worse. They start building new connections quietly, patiently, and strategically. Today, it is potatoes. But tomorrow, it could be energy exports finding new buyers in Asia. It could be technology partnerships shifting toward European markets. It could be entire manufacturing supply chains reorganizing themselves around new relationships that did not exist 5 years ago. The pattern is already forming beneath the headlines, and once a pattern like this begins, it rarely reverses quickly. Canada is sending a message not with words but with actions. Not through politicians, but through farmers and trade agencies and shipping routes. The message is this: we value our relationship with America, but we are no longer willing to depend on it entirely. Economic independence does not mean isolation. It means having more than one door open. And in a world where alliances can shift overnight and markets can change without warning, that is not just smart strategy. That is survival. The humble potato just told us more about the future of North American trade than most political speeches ever could. The question is, were you paying attention?